And last but not least, did everybody sign the sign-in sheet? Count 13 or 14 here. I'll get about 8 or 9 check boxes. So do that. We'll get it back.
Okay, and while y'all are doing that, I'm going to introduce Jim Golden as our speaker.
Matt, we're going to introduce ourselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll do self-introductions. Go ahead. We'll start with you, Marty.
I'm Marty with the Trucking Association. Marty Powell.
Justin Powell, Tiny Truck Lines.
Ursula Pickett, Kinko Group Incorporated.
Jessica Sullivan, Kinko Group. Michelle Hosford, Kinko. And Missy Oshevsky, Covenant. Chelsea Gibson, Covenant.
Steve Dowling, Covenant.
Monty King, Commercial Insurance Associates.
Larry Cole, Corporate Medical Services.
Allison Brock.
Sorry.
Allison Brock with Food.
Jim Golden, Covenant, and Scopelitis.
Rose Mann, retired, but representing, Power.
Paul Kimball, Kinko.
Yeah, Matt Holmes with Southern Chief. All right, so our speaker today is going to be Jim Golden talking about nuclear verdicts. Jim acts as negotiation counsel for many transportation companies at the firm of Scopelitis, Garvin, Light, Hanson, and Feary. He represents Covenant Logistics, where he served as general counsel, helping companies secure prompt, reasonable, humane settlements in high-stakes disputes is 100% of his legal practice. He has served as a visiting fellow in the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. In the public sphere, Jim has negotiated and consulted with senior staff of the President of the United States, the National Security Council, and with officials in China and Ukraine. So, Jim, you'll come on, please, sir.
Wow, what a heavy topic, nuclear verdicts. Some people say that in the geopolitical realm, you know, we're looking down Russia's 6,000 nuclear ICBMs, and so that's troublesome. I know a lot of people are buying those iodine pills, and that probably means international relations are not quite what you want them to be. But I'm also aware that, you know, from a verdict level, the exposure that trucking and logistics has now is unprecedented. It's really not just trucking and logistics. We face societal issues in the United States, which put lots and lots of institutions in grave peril. Our governmental institutions, our healthcare system, our criminal justice system, lots of our institutions are experiencing the same thing we are, and for many of the same reasons. Somehow we've gotten to a point after 70 years of relative peace and prosperity after World War II, and there's been a big loss of critical thinking, connecting causes with effects. And so let's just say I've sat in on too many mock jury presentations and been astonished by the discussions which juries have. And then we do polling of juries in those sections. And when you ask a question like, do corporations put profit above human life? And you get 80+% saying yes, you know you're in for an exciting trial. And so I understand. And I know what we all face. What I'd like to accomplish today is to do something that makes sense and is helpful. So I'm really informal, and I'd like to have a lot of time where we go back and forth. So feel free to interrupt me, but I'll try to reserve some time also for a structured question and answer. I'm a negotiator. I also happen to be a lawyer, but I don't really fill the trial lawyer role. I'm the guy that is the diplomat. If you're a country, you have diplomats and you have generals. And the truth is you need them both. The generals provide the credible deterrent to the other side taking unreasonable actions. And the diplomats are worthless unless you have a credible deterrent. What I've learned is that diplomats are also important. And, you know, if a country that has only generals and no diplomats is at a serious disadvantage. And so I thought about that early on, and I came to join Covenant many years ago, and I met with David Parker and said, David, I think that we can do some things better. I was general counsel, and we talked about it, and he gave me just enough rope to go out and hang myself. And it turned out that what we tried worked. And so Misty and many others have been a huge part of making that successful at Covenant. And, but we wouldn't have been able to do that but for David's initial decision to let us color outside the lines. And so that's what I'll talk about a bit today. But let me first tell you what I'm going to tell you. Let me give you an outline. One is, if you want to avoid nuclear verdicts, be proactive, not reactive. Being proactive is taking initiative and responsibility. 2, begin with the end in mind. What is your object? We're all so busy. I bet everyone in this room has an extremely busy life, and especially in your work environment. So we'll talk a bit about that. If you don't know your objective, it's really hard to get there. And sometimes if you're just reacting to the urgent, it sort of smothers the long-term importance. So number 2, begin with the end in mind. 3, do first things first, prioritize. All these things are self-evident in some sense, it's sort of truisms or maxims, but it's astonishing the degree to which the actual implementation of these simple principles changes everything. They come out of a book, and this is a quiz I'm going to ask you after I give a few more of these, if anybody knows the name of the book. But it's one of the most influential books written in the 20th century, and it's all over the world. But so first things first. 4 is think win-win. There's an interesting one. So they're coming at us with pitchforks and hammers and nuclear weapons, and you want us to talk about win-win? Yeah, believe it or not. And we'll go into why that makes sense. And hopefully I can give you some specific examples and answer some questions that'll flesh that out. And the 5th is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Really important, counterintuitive for someone like me. I had to learn this one the hard way. And, you know, I should tell you that the beginning of my learning to negotiate, I actually learned it as a survival skill. I had 4 daughters. So does that tell you? That will, you know. All right, be proactive. I joined Covenant and began to look around at what we were doing, and we had some great trial counsel all over the country, and I went out and talked to lots of them, and pretty quickly concluded that I thought we could enhance how we handle claims, especially our biggest claims. If you look at the numbers, the big numbers make all the difference. The big verdicts make all the difference. Big verdicts and big settlements, they really skew everything else. So first things first, target the biggest exposure and do something meaningful about that. David was very, very open to doing things with a certain set of values and doing them for the right reasons. And so a lot of what I've learned just never would have happened but for that meeting that day. And I'm new general counsel, and, you know, I'm going to the founder and chairman and president and CEO and everything else. But, and that's the hard part, you know, if you don't ever start, if you just stay in the reactive mode, or you've got to keep your head down because there's a lot of artillery fire and you don't want to be misunderstood, that's the easy road. But unless you start with taking initiative and putting some skin in the game, none of these other principles are going to make much sense. So I think that's really significant. You are taking a risk. If you say we can innovate in ways that are important, you're sticking your head up. And sometimes the tallest blade of grass falls first. It's an old Russian saying. So I got it, but it's a choice to make. And then once you do initiate, taking responsibility for your own actions and ultimately for the actions of your company turns out to be very important as well. By the way, I've given you the first 5 principles out of the book. Anyone recognize these principles and know the name of the book?
I'll give it a shot.
Yes.
Is it the 4 disciplines of execution?
No?
7 habits of highly effective.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there you go. It's the first 5. We can go into the last 2. They're also important, but we've got limited time here. Good job. You get the new Mustang that's sitting outside. So, yeah, just, I don't have the keys, but I know someone here does. But that's great. I actually, just a plug for Stephen Covey and Company. He's done a great job, and I don't work for him. He's deceased for his company. He did some good things at Covenant, and we benefited from that. But I actually found that book to be transformative, life transformative. I think my life would have taken a totally different turn, but for that book. So I really highly recommend it. I do so to students all over the world and to others. So I think that's a life changer. Begin with the end in mind. He has an example in that book of if you're out in the jungle and you've got people sharpening saws, you know you're cutting through the jungle and you're working so hard and you got trackers and you got people shooting the arrows at the wild animals that are trying to eat you up. And you're tracking your progress each day through the jungle. You know, we survived this, that obstacle could have taken us out. And then we made, 1.25 kilometers today. And that's the most we ever made. We all congratulate ourselves sitting around the campfire that night. We survived and we made a lot of progress. And then someone climbs a tree and looks around and says, what are we doing? We're heading deeper into the jungle. We're just trying to get some supplies out here to the coast so we can get them transported and get some new supplies. Climb the tree. What is the end? The end that I had in mind was to settle our worst claims earlier, much earlier, if possible. I started with a presupposition that there was a window. There are windows of opportunity which open and close. It's always dynamic. And if you can hit one of the early windows, it may be a totally different kind of experience for the company than if you wait and wait and wait and you're reactive. You're waiting for the complaint. You're waiting for discovery. You're waiting for blah, 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 blah. There was a window out here many times that if you had acted, taken the initiative early, different outcome. Seen it over and over and over and over. Second, and I know everyone does that. I know that empathy is an industry standard now. It was not always. There was a time when it was denied, delay, and defend, regardless of merit. And then you had something equally ridiculous from the plaintiff side, overstate, all of that. But the implementation of first things first, making it practical, actionable, is really key. And then think win-win. How does that work? This is a zero-sum game, right? I win, you lose. You win, I lose. What if it's more than that? What if there are interests that are not only economic? Example. I was in some negotiations with a plaintiff's attorney, and we had offered him a lot of money. There's a widow, and it was 3 small boys. Her husband had been a big business type, but it had basically dissipated the fortune. And I thought that we had a good shot at getting it done at a certain range of numbers, and I could see it wasn't working. But I had, as a part of the first things first, I'd gotten to know the plaintiff's attorney. you can do deals with people that you know that there's some mutual respect, that you've been pretty just straight up with, that you could never do otherwise. So if you've begun by reaching out to the family, if they're unrepresented, but if they're represented, reaching out to their lawyer and getting together for early face-to-face visits. I know many of you probably do that, or your companies do that, but it's become institutionalized at Covenant. And to be very honest and is so important. You gain so much credibility, and it's just the right thing to do. Many of the initial conversations that I have with plaintiff's attorney, I walk in and say, after I talk about, we're so sorry for the loss, I say, the proximate cause of this accident was our driver's negligence, and this company stands responsible, and we are here to do the right thing. In fact, we want to treat this widow and her 3 children as we would wish our spouse to be treated, were the roles reversed. And then back it up. Here's a check for $50,000 because the breadwinner's gone. We know the kids are in private schools. We don't see any, you got payments on your house. We don't see any advantage to us. We just don't think it's the right thing to do for you to lose your house while this thing strings out for years, for them to drop out of their schools and not get to be with their friends. I mean, you're going through one of the hardest things that human beings can endure on this planet. And we don't think it's right for us to try to squeeze you by trying to get you to settle because you can't survive until you get that money. And when they get up off the floor and sit back in their chair, and I say, and we've got, 800 documents, 1,200 documents, 1,500 documents. You know what they want. We've already got them. We could make you fight for these like you normally do, go through formal discovery for years. Why would we do that? The proximate cause of the accident is our negligence. So what is our job? Our job is to, first of all, not have this family, what remains of this family, be further traumatized. I mean, would you want that if it was your wife, your mother? Well, we don't either. It's just not right. So we're gonna be square with you, and you may think that I'm weak because you've never seen a general counsel or a negotiation counsel come out and meet you at this time. And I get it if you believe that. And we'll see as we go forward. Maybe I'm weak, and that's the reason I'm here. This case is the worst case I've ever seen. It's only got one side. Oh, if they find out. Or maybe I'm legitimately here and not behind my desk, 2,000 miles away, with John across town that you've always worked with for the last 15 years, that you butted heads over and over again. Because we legitimately, our company's made a decision and it's who we are. And it'd be easier for me to stay back there and us lob artillery fire across the country for the first 2 years. But I really believe and know now that I've been doing it for a while, there's a better way, and it's going to work out better for your client. And I'm asking you to color outside the lines. I'm asking you actually not to take a fee out of this $50,000. You didn't do anything for this. This is a gift. And by the way, we're not going to ever mention that. If you get a verdict against us, we can't settle this case. We will not ask for a set-off of $50,000, right? We're doing this because we should. We believe that being a human trumps being a risk manager or a safety manager or a lawyer or a CEO. It sort of trumps everything. And so anyway, those first conversations are interesting. And then following it up with actions and not sweating the small stuff. You're in a multi-billion-dollar plane. You know it, and they know it. They know you know it, and they know you know it. Right? No one's got any secrets here about this claim. We know we know all about the jury pool, we know the verdicts, we know this thing, we know the facts, we know the law 6 ways from Sunday. So our job is to figure out the value of this claim. Really. And there are obstacles to that because we've grown up in an adversarial system. In law school, they teach us that in order to resolve a conflict, what you need to keep in mind is that you've got these advocates, and your job is to be one of the advocates, right? This is a law school class. Your job is to be one of the advocates. You got your CEOs back here, and they're the princes, and so we got this big field, and you get on a horse, and you have this big thing under your arm, and the one that knocks the other guy off, hopefully killing him, wins the case, and the truth emerges out of the fires of conflict. That's going to be the truth. So if you got a guy that knows how to duck a little better, right? We don't believe that. Trust me when I tell you that you need a credible deterrent. Trust me when I tell you that I used to be a smoked earth lawyer. I would smoke the ground. I'm not only going to smoke you, I'm going to smoke the ground you stand on. It will be smoking when I get through with you. Your client that you've been representing for 30 years will never use your firm again. I'm thinking of you. I may be on the defense, but I'm thinking of you every minute of every day. When I get up and I'm shaving, I'm thinking about how to take you down. I may be on the defense, but watch yourself, because if you try to take advantage, you won't see the outcome from the blind side that hurts the most. Any questions? Credible deterrent. It's better if you split those roles, right? The guy that just said that, am I going to be able to, is he the guy that's going to later say, hey, by the way, you should know this. We could do a deal, but you don't, here's what you don't know, right? It's really better if I'm not the guy that did that, here's your trial counsel. I don't even have him at our initial meeting. And then we get to know one another. We have dinners together. I know about your kids, and I've gotten calls from attorneys asking me for advice about their kids. They were on the other side of $1 billion case. I mean, we're humans, right? I'm not giving up anything I shouldn't be giving up, neither are they. But I get to know them. Really important. Read, I do more listening in those. It's not uncommon for me to have a 3-hour lunch on a major case on my initial meeting with plaintiff's counsel. Do you know what I learned in 3 hours? What do they love? Who are they? What are they most proud of? What do they fear? What? On and on and on and on and on. They hand me a book. Important to know who you're dealing with. And I'm candid about who I am, where I came from, what my real objectives are, the things that I've screwed up in the past, why I'm trying to make it right. You get to know someone at that level, it doesn't mean they're going to, submarine their client by any means, but it means you're in a whole different situation to negotiate the claim. So then the lawyer that represents the widow and the 3 children, because we've got that kind of mutual respect, no one has to prove anything. I've taken a lot of hits right to the face without an equal and opposite response, even though I'm a lawyer. Nothing to prove, nothing to hide. Nothing to lose. That's a lie. Cards are face up. I've offered you with the money that is well within a range of reasonableness at this point. We could argue this for days. You know the merits. I know who you are. I know more about you than you think I know. I've done massive research. Why haven't you accepted this? You're not giving me any of the right signals. What's going on? What am I missing? Pulls his desk drawer, pulls out a paper, shoves it across. This is a common law state. All the money you've offered would be soaked up by these creditors. The widow never signed his loans and all these business deals, but they've got the first shot at this money. That's our problem. So I hired the best spendthrift trust attorney in that state. And I said, what about a spendthrift trust? Can it be, retroactive? And I don't know what you're talking about. I don't either, but I know they're out there, so I hired them. And you prepare the document, and I take it and say, how about that? Send it to all the creditors and give them a call and tell them you'll settle for 10 cents on the dollar. Because they do. We do the deal. Is it, what are the facts? We both got our hired guns. Misty is the one of the plaintiffs. She's lost, man, excuse you, Misty, lost her husband and one of her children, a 4-year-old. Right? Heaven forbid. And she's had terrible problems. She's going through unbelievable pain. She's taking so many narcotics, she was in the accident, that it's life-threatening. And she lives in hell. And there are 2 theories as to why that's true. One says it's trauma-induced, and one says it's something that is totally unrelated and systemic. And guess which side the plaintiffs, here's the plaintiff's expert, medical expert, here's the defense medical expert. Guess which says which? Anybody can guess? What have they been saying for the last 10 years on every plaintiff? Right? Mr. Plaintiff's Counsel, I got a crazy idea. Here it is. What if you get your hired gun together with my hired gun, and they choose the greatest expert in the field as to her specific symptoms, who has never testified, never will testify for either side, the preeminent authority in the country, the world, and they do the examination of her. And we act based on the truth instead of what these boys are telling us. Yes. Can we do that? Yeah, I know they didn't teach us that, but yeah, I think we can pretty well do what we want to do. Do you get the okay from your client? I've got the okay from mine. They agree, choose the expert. It turns out that it's totally unrelated to the accident, right? She had an undiagnosed disease, which is, because it was undiagnosed, is being treated exactly wrong. And now we've got all kinds of secondary harm. They start treating it now that we have a diagnosis for this little known disease, and her life turns. That is unrecognized value. We've just created immense value, right? We found value that you can't quantify in dollar terms. It works, it turns out. So think win-win. That's thinking win-win. We've changed her life. We've changed her kids' lives. And in this case, it's also benefited our company greatly. Sometimes it won't, sometimes it will. But the truth actually turns out to be important. Not just gamesmanship, but tactics, right? I could give so many examples, but thinking win-win, seeking first to understand and then be understood. Went to a rehabilitation facility, and the mother of the male decedent, her son, been involved with one of our trucks in a tragic accident. his children, two little ones are there. His wife was there. She was also involved in the accident, and she had a catastrophic traumatic brain injury. She's hanging clothes on a line to try to increase her motor skills. And the grandmother's there and the kids. And you asked the question that her lawyer didn't ask. How have their lives changed? What's your hope for them? Planning to raise them? What would help? And then you listen with your heart as well as your head. I was so hard-hearted for so long. There was only one thing harder than my heart. It was my head. I tried to make everything cognitive. I mean, I didn't care about some people. I wasn't a demon, but I mean, I'd sort of turned off my heart at a young age. My dad, our family left my dad when I was 8, 2 little sisters in the background. I became the man of the family, right? I love my dad. Why am I telling you this? Because it's the truth and it's important and it has a real impact on how I deal with other people and how we do deals. And I never saw him once, except once after that. Turned out he had some serious mental issues. He swam a river, escaped the mental institution, died. And when they told me he died, I was in high school. Hadn't seen him once since I was 8. My mom came, sat me down at the kitchen table. And she told me. I mean, I've been thinking about this guy every time. They said, what do you want for Christmas? I don't want a bike. See him. And that hurts after a while. And you think, gosh, if he doesn't love me, I don't love him. And you just close the door on that and stuck it down. I made a big door. You know those doors they have on submarines that you have to turn? I threw that sucker in place. And it was so good that when she told me that, I felt absolutely nothing. If she had said our dog got hit and has been killed, I would have felt something. She told me my father had died and I felt nothing. So I know about closing off, not being willing to be vulnerable. How do you get around that? Well, you're not like your dad, you're never weak. You think faster, you are smarter, you train well, you attack always, 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 even if you're on the defense, and you never give up. Yeah, well, when you've got another side that has that same philosophy, you go to war, and wars turn out to be costly, not only in economic terms for your company, but in human terms for the widow. I was at a mediation one time, and a CFO was there with me, and the plaintiff's lawyer came out of the thing and said, he pointed at me and said, God makes it really hard for me to do my job. And the CFO looked at him and said, that's funny, gets along with folks. I said, what did he do wrong? And he said, I can't hate him. Quote. Right? They bottle that hatred. I bottled my hatred. And it's a great fuel. Then I can use it against that plaintiff's counsel every moment I think about destroying you. That's where it came from. And it's hugely motivational. And it's like wind in the sails of a sailing ship. And if you've taught the plaintiff's widow, surviving spouse to hate as well, they don't want a reasonable settlement. They want a pound of flesh. They want your hide. They can tell it's all a pretense, it's a fake. You won't admit, you won't do that. You won't, we're here to do the right thing, but your actions, right? No integrity. Actions don't match words. And then if you can listen to that grandmother and those children, listen carefully with your heart as well as your head, because your heart is no longer stone cold. Listen with your heart as well as your head and actually seek the well-being of those children. Put yourself in her spot to the extent that you can. What in the world would I do? Does it mean you throw open the gates, do an unreasonable settlement? Of course not. Does it mean you don't have a credible deterrent? Of course not. It means you just try to find a better route that doesn't further damage her, doesn't teach her to hate. Those children are going to have an older person raising them, and if she is motivated by bitterness and hatred, they're going to have a tougher time. They've already got a rough road. They don't need that. And it's hard. If you came up like I did, it's hard to listen with your heart. But loosen up that submarine door and listen with your heart. It's risky. The guy that said, I can't hate him, I met with he and his client, and he said, he called the next day and he said, my client wants to fire me and hire you. And I said, you can't do that. He's on the other side. I'll tell another bad story of myself. So this is about us living life abundantly. We've all got our jobs, and that's great. This stuff rolls over into families, right? I was running for the House of Representatives, a young guy. I had hired, my campaign looked like a Senate campaign. That thing was, I'd raised more money in the 3rd District of Tennessee than anyone had ever raised as somebody coming out of nowhere. We did a great job. And what happened? Phyllis and my 4 daughters had no husband and no father, because it was all about winning. And she called me one day and said, I really need to talk to you. I said, honey, we're shooting a commercial. I said, she said, no, come on. I came home. Sat down at the kitchen table and you be her for me? And I said, okay, I'm here. What's the problem? Kept great eye contact. She talked for 15 minutes. I'm doing 17 things in my mind. Right? Bam, 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 bam. She stopped and said, tell me what I said. Let her down. So what did I do? I was a liar. solution is. I will run a continuous loop at any point in time, no matter what else is going on. I will record in my mind the last 20 seconds of every word she said, and it'll be on continuous loop. When that 20 seconds is over, it'll be replaced by the next. Anytime she ever asks me that question again, I got the answer. This is how smart I was. So next time she needed me, I said, what you said was blank, 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 blank. I quoted it with the proper emphasis. And she looked at me and said, you didn't listen. You did not hear me. I said, what? Where was my quote? That's exactly what you said. And she didn't know exactly how to say it. She just kept saying, you didn't hear me. And I could not figure it out. It took me years to figure it out. Stupid me, right? I wasn't listening with my heart. She was trying to reveal something here. I was listening with this. If you're interacting with families, you gotta do both. They know if you don't. It makes all the difference. Is it risky? Yeah, but it's more risky not to at all kinds of levels. The lady that was the grandmother, once we did the deal, she came over to the side and she said, and this driver had a hard time, good guy. He made a mistake, a small mistake that cost people's lives and destroyed his family. And she said, I tell the driver, I know he didn't mean to cause this accident, and that I forgive him. That's serious value we've uncovered. And this has happened over and over and over and over and over again. And I've faced and gone head to head with some of the nation's toughest, most successful plaintiffs' attorneys. And the conventional wisdom is they'd drown me into powder. And they didn't. In fact, the thing that I have most often heard after we do the deal with these guys is, I have never done anything like this in my life. First time I've done this. But you know, this was actually refreshing. I don't know exactly what we did here, but this was refreshing. What we did here was about the right thing, despite the fact that we're lawyers. Seek first to understand means listen with your heart as well as your head. In our roles as important people dealing with very, very important issues that will determine whether our company stays in existence in some cases, whether all these people are going to lose their jobs, whether a lot of bad things are going to happen and we're just snookered, but also what's going to happen to people who are in a tough spot. Listen with your heart. Doesn't mean you check your brain at the door. They're not mutually exclusive. I thought they were mutually exclusive, right? Nice guys finish last. Wrong. And I can tell you that I've had an opportunity to apply this in other areas. And in the family, it works in diplomacy among nations. This works. So those are the five things. What have I told you? Be proactive, begin with the end in mind. First things first, think win-win. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Comments, questions, observations?
Jim, I have a few for you.
Yes, sir.
The first is I've heard that you're judged, for lack of a better term, meaning a plaintiff or defendant, by who you hire to represent you. Would you speak to that in your opinion, if that there's any truth to that?
It's actually one of the key points that I didn't raise today. But who you send, who they are, not how slick they are, not how smart they are, who they are. What makes them tick is absolutely crucial, and it can't be people in those circumstances smell a fake. And if you try to just pull this off, well, he said that, I'll do that, and you don't really believe it, it's going to be really counterproductive and really demoralizing to everyone. So yeah, it needs to send the right person. It needs to be a person that has the right motives and the right values, but also a person so they can say these things with credibility. Also a person that is knowledgeable and has done, preferably has done a lot of this kind of work. I mean, you can't start by having done, you gotta start out, but experience matters. And it needs to be someone who doesn't have anything to prove, right? They're not trying to prove anything to their immediate supervisor or the person over that, or to their father who died 30 years ago, or their spouse, They can take a hit and they don't have to fluff everything, but they can check their ego at the door for a higher purpose.
Good. And the second question, which may be a different time to answer this one, but I'm just curious, you had mentioned your heart used to be as hard as your head. Can you think back about the moment where that changed and give us a little more insight?
It wasn't a moment. It was many moments. And you can still tell I'm still emotional about living a life. I let her down so many times. I mean, I did good things too, but I really let her down. This hard. It's so much to prove. So she was huge, and the fact that she loved me through that, there's no way to put a value on that. I had a grand mal seizure. There a lot of heat. I was taking all kinds of medications. Grand mal seizures is abnormal electrical activity you have in the brain. Pretty well fried my brain. And so much so that I couldn't take any sound or any light. I couldn't do any work. My motor skills were trashed. I couldn't drive. And I was just hanging on. I was in a terrible. It was like one continuous panic attack, and I couldn't think straight. And I was wasted. It was over. And so I moved in with my mother, a man with a wife and 4 kids. She could watch over me constantly. She put me in the living room on a couch, closed all the drapes, and I stayed in there. And that was this thing that I promised myself I would never do. Wouldn't abandon my family like my dad abandoned us, right? If he had fought harder and smarter, I wouldn't have seen my little sisters go through what they went through. Never gonna happen. Happened. So now, I'd always said, as long as I can move a single finger, I'll fight. And I'll think. And I couldn't. And she came to me on Christmas Eve. I'd been at my mom's house for, I don't know how many weeks. It was a long time. She said, you got to come home for the kids for Christmas. I said, I can't. I want the kids to see me like this. She said, you got to. I need you. She said, I know you think you've become what you said you'd never become, that you're worthless. Basically, these are not her words, but you're more than the sum of your performance. God loves you. I love you. It's fun. Come home for Christmas. That was a turning point. Lots of others. Not always a tragedy, sometimes. Not always a loss. Sometimes you say, man, I took the jacket off that ball. I connected. Thank you. I don't think I'm the measure and center of all that exists. I didn't ever believe that. You got to have a lot of blind faith to believe that. It's amazing the number of people that are now accepting that philosophy. I am the measure and center of all that exists. And that doesn't pass the most basic test of rationality. But I didn't connect that mental assent I gave to that proposition always to my behavior. I still don't always do it, but I missed that connection a lot. I was too busy defending myself and proving myself. So having those base values, though, that I at least aspire to, and then ultimately coming and saying, I can't do this. And looking up and realizing that I'm loved. I'm loved by some people that know me. It flips the world right side up. You wonder why things don't work? Because you got the world upside down, looking through the wrong lens. It flips it up, it starts making sense. And it's a process. You still fall down and do something stupid. But you now got some place to stand. Yeah. I realize I've been very personal, but I don't apologize for that. This is where what I do comes from. And it results in actual quantifiable, hard, cold cash. Yes, you can improve claims experience dramatically. I had a guy, they call him Quants. He's a genius with numbers. He was in one of the classes that I spoke in quite a number of years ago in a business school. And he called me or contacted me, emailed me something later. He went to work for McKinsey & Company. And he wrote me and he said, I just want you to know that McKinsey let me lead a pilot project for an insurance company, not in the United States. And we tested the principles, some of the stuff you taught me in that class. And we tested the results, and he said our numbers went off the chart, and the insurance company changed their entire claims process. I can give you story after story after story after story, but this makes economic sense, but it also makes sense just in a much broader frame. So, end I have in mind: early, reasonable, humane. Any other questions, observations? All right. Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Really not what I was expecting, but beyond what I was expecting at the same time. Thank you so much. I get a motion to close?
Motion closed.
Second. Thank y'all for coming today.
I like you for lunch.
We swap, Mark.
When you gonna be here?
Oh, really?